Hey everyone, this is P4L. Thanking you for joining us for another community chatter day. We got two special guests today. A third one couldn't make it. Oh, that's me again. But wanted to thank both Steve and Extra Zero for making it today. You guys might know Steve from our previous chatter days, but and you might know Extra Zero from, as you can see in his background, Figure Action Podcast, or as we call FAP. But let's go
Some people
ahead
know
and
me
get
as
started.
T-Man's friend, so there's that.
T-Man's friend, yeah. Okay, hold on. Let's go ahead and get started. Let me share our slides so we can get straight into the guest tech specs. So, as I said, we got two guests today. So, Steve, why don't you introduce yourself to the stream? Let us know where you're coming from. What has you interested in joining the community chatter day about gaming?
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Camilleri. I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I've been a gamer for years. I really started probably back when I was under 10 years old with the good old Atari 2600, and I got hooked ever since then. And so over the years, from Atari to Sega and ColecoVision when I was a lot younger, and then I took a real interest into things once the first PlayStation came out and Xbox, and I've just been hooked ever since. So looking forward to it tonight.
Dang, Atari 2600, you old.
Oh yeah, when you were saying you turned 40, I was like, man, I remember when I was 40. Those were the good old days.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve, for coming back with us, and I'm sure we have you signed up for a bunch of other topics in the future as well. So I'm sure we'll be back with you. But let's move on to Extra Zero. Oh, we're gonna call you Extra Zero the whole
Just
time.
call me Zero. That
Okay,
works.
Zero.
Yeah, I just put it in there. For those that don't know, you can find me on a little podcast called Figure Action Podcast. Some people know me from that. People know me from my days on the Realm of Collectors. Um, but I'm also a lifelong gamer. I cut my teeth on gaming in the late '80s, and actually, I was playing games before I could talk or walk. My uncle sat me down in front of Super Mario Brothers on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and I actually beat the game when I was 5 years old. So they all thought I was going to be a child prodigy, and I disappointed them greatly. But hey, at least I've got a nice lifelong experience with gaming. A little unique because my grandparents were actually gamers, and my grandfather had a big interest in video gaming. He had a television, Atari 2600. So I got to see my grandparents play games, which was great. My great aunt was a gamer too. She loved the game Phoenix and Frogger. So, I've had a very long standing history with gaming, and just kind of been a big part of my entire life. And I've played every generation of console you can speak of. And another cool thing about me is my grandmother managed a bowling alley when I was a kid. So the great part about that was I got exposed to so many great arcade games growing up. So I'm ready to talk about it and get into it because gaming is just a big part of my life.
Man, I feel like a lot of us 80s, 90s kids grew up playing arcades in the games in the arcade section of bowling alleys. That was like,
Yeah.
if it wasn't like a
For sure.
laundromat, I knew a lot of people played in the laundromat. If it wasn't a laundromat, it was a bowling alley.
To interject there, what I miss is the when you go in and you didn't know whether there were going to be new games in there or not. And
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
feeling you got when you saw a new set of games, or at least even one new game in that little corner in a bowling alley, was like it was like
yeah. It
Christmas
was
morning.
it was awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
That's where the crowds were. Like you would come in, you'd be
yeah.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
"Oh shit, there's a new game clearly." All right, so let me go ahead and add that back to the screen. So yeah, that's our guest tech specs. For me, I have always had a passion for gaming as well. Not only just growing up as a Nintendo kid, all the way through the modern consoles, but for a short time, I was, before pro leagues came out, I was, kind of a semi-professional fighting game player. Qualified for Tekken 4 nationals. Got sent out to Las Vegas to compete in the nationals by Namco after qualifying at one of their 13 regionals. So I was really, really into spending a lot of my college years like traveling up and down the East Coast to different tournaments and stuff like that. And then in my post college years, when you're single and you have all that expendable cash, basically had like the frat house for gamers coming over, and we would just game all night. And then on adulthood, family, that kind of took me away. But I'm trying to get back into it now, and again with more expendable cash. I think I've shown it before in my end of the year collection stuff. I show my like little arcade collection. I have like 4 arcade cabinets with a bunch of arcade gear, stuff I'm refurbishing, stuff I've already refurbished. So kind of the gamut of gaming. But I'm really excited because, as you said, Zero, the community chatter is really interesting for me, is because I'm trying to switch it up between the traditional topics of my channel, the interest group of Transformers, collectibles, and stuff like that, but also switching it back and forth every other Chatterday to something that's not quarterly focused on Transformers, and seeing what other nerddom that we're into. So being able to give you an avenue to express your gaming nerddom fills me with joy. So with that, let me just do a couple of quick shout outs to some regulars and some actually folks that may be new. TM Reviews, obviously, Sony, Mecha Reviews, Willido Prime, Anthony Brown Jr., who was on previously, I think, and he's going to be coming back for, I think, more of a comic book discussion. I think we're doing manga versus Western comics. John Ingles, I don't know if I've seen John before, probably, but I'm bad with names. The Rusty Mechanic. Rusty has been really good. He's been trying to keep me motivated, keep me on top of things. He volunteered to come on this after our third guest had some conflicts, but I wanted to save him for some other topics that he was more interested in. So he's signed up for a lot as well. Winston, who else we got? Inu Tabby, Big M, and I thought I saw Kato. Where's Kato? Oh, there it is, Kato. Obviously, Kato. It's Kato. All right, so I think that's all we have for now. So let's go ahead and get started. We got a whole bunch of segments, some new ones and some old ones. So without further ado, let's go on to the first segment. Returning is Power Rankings. And this time we're going to do another revisit of, if you guys remember, we did a tier list of legends. We're doing a tier list of consoles. Ooh. So caveat here, it's not old enough to get back to Atari 2600 Steve age, but we are starting.
I was going to say, I was just going to put that in the S category right away, just for nostalgia.
But we're only gonna go from kind of like what they call like third generation Nintendo Atari. I think it has Atari 7800 all the way up to modern day. We're not going to be doing a couple things. We're not going to be doing portables, so keep that in mind. And we're not going to be doing like add-ons like the 32X or Sega CD, even though they do have that. We could be here forever if we did. And we're doing like the major console makers, so we're not doing some of these random ones that I looked up that I never even heard of. So like Nintendo, Sega, Sony, Xboxes, Atari, stuff like that.
I gotta know, did anybody own the Tower of Power other than me? Like, put that in the chat if you had that Tower of Power.
Tower of Power? I don't even know what that is.
Tower of Power is your Sega 32X CD.
Oh, yeah. All right. So we're going to do that. Let me switch over to the actual tier maker. So, well, as you can see, I'm going to scroll down. Oh, hold on. I got to share that. I have to share that screen. Hold on one second. Share. Stop sharing this one. Sorry, I forgot this is a different tab, so I got to balance it. There we go. So as you can see now, I scrolled down. This is one that somebody had already previously made, and I just took the ones that we're going to do up front. But we're going all the way to the PS5 here, and there were like 3 times as many consoles, and these aren't even all of them. Like the Magnavox Odyssey, the Intellivision, the ColecoVision, which Steve mentioned. There were also the weird ones that my friends had that they were sad that they got that. They got like a 3DO instead of a PlayStation or something like that. But we're going to keep to the mainstays. Obviously, as we go along one at a time, I want you guys in the chat to give us your vote for where you think these consoles rank. And we're going to go from the granddaddies all the way to the modern ones. So let's start off first with Nintendo. So I'm doing these in chronological order. So Nintendo, where do we see Nintendo ranking here, guys?
Come on, S tier. That is S tier console, man.
S tier.
That's
Yeah.
gotta be
Yeah, I have to agree.
All right, so
Yeah.
I need some reasoning besides the fact that it's the granddaddy
It's
console.
the birthplace of so many classics. You have Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 3, Metroid, Legend of Zelda. You know, you have like for like sports. That was like where sport. And I'm not a big sports gamer, but I can recognize. You know, you have Tecmo Bowl. You have oh god, what was it? What was the basketball?
What was it? 50-yard dash or 10-yard?
Yeah, 50-yard dash. Obviously, you have Bird versus Jordan. I mean, you know, even outside of that, third-party support was huge on the NES. You have so many classic Metal Gear, Ninja Turtles. That whole franchise kicked it off there. You know, Kirby's Adventure, the Game Boy game, was okay, but Kirby's Adventure, ooh. It's such an iconic system. You know, I just really don't know how to Mega Man. The whole Mega Man series is there.
Yes.
They're games that they may be rudimentary, they may be rough around the edges, but they're games that any generation, despite the fact that these games are aging, can play and appreciate. And that's what I think makes it S tier.
Yeah,
oh man,
for me, there were two games in particular, and Zero mentioned one of them already, Tecmo Bowl. Like I just wasted so much of my youth on that game. You know, just absolutely loved it, and even I'm a big sports gamer, so for me, the big things were Tecmo Bowl, and really on that console, that's when the first really good hockey video game came out. And you know, being from Canada and loving hockey, that you know that was just huge for me and my buddies.
Wrestling too. Wrestling was
yeah. And so Tecmo Bowl and the first really good mainstream hockey game that was on a video game console.
Blades of Steel.
Yeah, were you saying Blades of Steel?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, just those two alone. I mean, for anyone who's a sports gamer, that's all you got to say.
Look at that Excite Bike. You know, the other thing that you guys haven't mentioned. I mean, you guys all make great points. They have so many iconic origins of characters and series that we still play today, and we still look forward to the sequels every year. But one of the other things that I would mention is the Nintendo. I remember being just so interesting in terms of the peripherals too, like not just the controllers, but like when I had Gyromite. That I still have Rob. Like I literally have him in the other room. Rob, I brought him back from my parents' house. Rob, you playing Dynamite by yourself with Rob, and then the light gun, the Zapper, Nintendo Zapper, playing like Hogan's Alley, and stuff like that.
Saving your game, and you know, just the way those peripherals had such tactile feels, like the NES Advantage and the Zapper. Like we take it for granted today, but like when you pull the trigger on a Zapper, like that click, that's so substantial. And then, you know, the NES Advantage was, I think, probably the first arcade stick that actually felt like the real arcade peripheral.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that you know, with that system, with the, you know, even just the base controllers, but all the peripherals, those were such a leap. I mean, certainly compared to something like the Atari, for example, but those were all just amazing. And then on top of it too, like Zero said, you know, being able to save games and things like that, you know, those things just never existed before. So it was such a fundamental change for gaming when I was a kid.
This is clearly S tier. If you just look at the chat, like everyone's naming just a plethora of games, and every one of them just, even Burger Time.
That was a good one.
You know, the arcade ports, and it was like one of the first times that a lot of the early '80s arcade games felt like the arcade experience. Now, when we get to Sega Genesis, there'll be something to be, or Mega Drive, depending on where you're from. There'll be something to be said about that. But I feel like, you know, a lot of those early '80s games, they translated so well to the Nintendo Entertainment System that it was, you were like getting the experience at home. And you know, it wasn't the other interesting thing about the the NES on that point is those original black box games and first generation games. There was just such a leap from what they were able to do in chipsets and games. Vertical scrolling is a huge one. Like you listen to a lot of the old developers talk, and they'll say like, the stuff we did in Mario 3, we didn't even dream was possible, when we were making those original games on NES.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and just a leap forward. I mean, I remember playing Spider-Man on my uncle's Atari, and I don't remember what Atari was because, again, I'm not that old. But I remember it was literally just like a red and blue block, and you were like, you can barely
use your
tell
imagination.
what the characters are, right? Climb up the side of that wall. But when you had Mega Man, you could see those different pixels and his gun and the Mega Buster. It felt like even though it was only 1 or 2 years after, it felt like just a phenomenal leap forward. Definitely.
It was such a big shift for sure.
Yeah. We can talk about Nintendo all day, but let's go ahead and go to the next one that came next. The competitor that we remember most, I think, with Nintendo in those early days, the Sega Master System.
I'm not Brazilian, so I'm going to say D.
D. What?
Look, I appreciate the Master System for what it is, and to me, D is passing. People could hate on me for this one, but I just don't think that there's enough standout games on the Master System. My experience and I'll say my experience a lot of times comes from the Sega Game Gear. And to me, what you got out of Master System games was more suited for portable than it was for a home console. Just in my personal opinion, not a big Alex Kidd fan, not a big fan of like the watered down games that Sega did, like the Master System / Game Gear version of Shinobi. So again, maybe unpopular, but I'm saying D.
Yeah, I'd say C at the most. I mean, I echo a lot of those points. There just wasn't a lot that really stood out for me for that type of system.
So for me, I remember like my older cousin Paul. He was like the oldest of my cousins. He had this, and I remember wanting to go over his house all the time and play. I distinctly remember you had like the optional like joystick that you could screw into the D-pad.
Yes.
I thought that was cool.
NES had that too.
Was that?
NES had that too.
On the default controller? No.
Yeah, there was a third-party attachment that you could get that did that.
But this was like a stock controller, man.
Well, I mean,
I definitely don't agree it's a top tier. I think D is a little harsh, but I also remember that it was a game that you got to play that maze game with the slug without a game. So without any games, you could start the Sega Master System and get that free game. I remember playing lots of it. So I agree. I would probably say C because I think it was lackluster in the sense that it didn't have as much longevity as some of the others, especially with
it did have the longevity because the Master System went for, if you want to talk about tech toy and the Brazilian market, the Sega Master System has the longest lifespan probably of any if you're talking about the world, any console.
No, I mean like franchises, like properties. I do remember playing the hell out of Altered Beast though. Like I still love that. So I think, can we agree on C? Can we agree on C, or we're gonna leave it in D?
I mean, I'm the only person saying D, so I'd be willing to
no higher than he said no higher than C, so he could be. Where are you, Steve?
I'm fine either way, and like it was just never monumental for me. And
all right, we're gonna leave it in D then. We'll put it in D. I was pushing for you, Sega Master fan.
I'm not a Sega hater either, because when we get to the Genesis.
Oh yes, yeah.
All right, so next up, Atari 7800. I have zero input on this because again, I barely remember which Atari I even played. So Steve, I'm gonna let you kick this one off. Where do you see this guy?
You know what? For me, it's S just for the pure nostalgia of my childhood. I mean, I never had a 7800. I had the 2600, but I mean, those are my really younger years, and my first exposure to any type of gaming. I mean, the games all sucked. We all know that, but
well, you can't just put an S tier to the nostalgia. Come on.
No, but for me, yeah, it's purely based on nostalgia, and that's it. I mean, in terms of the game quality, no, but nostalgia is a big thing for me when it comes to game.
I'm going to say that the 7800 is a B minus. And it's a B minus because I don't see the 2600 on here. And the 7600 is backwards compatible. The games on the 2600 on the 7800 are okay. You have some like really good ones like Basket Brawl and like the Space Invaders that came out on 7800. I forget what it was called. For the sake of being backwards compatible and for what it did, like it's got a really competent port of Xenophobe on there. It's an okay system. The biggest problem with the 7800 is it had a terrible sound chip. It had the same sound chip as the 2600, if I remember correctly. But there were chips that could be on the cartridges to make the games actually sound better, but only 2 games took advantage of that. It's a competent enough system. It just didn't have the right support, and I think giving it a B is kind of generous. But I say a B minus just because we don't have the 2600 on here, and you get that whole library. And it's like Atari games don't look or sound the best, but they play awesome. So you got to give it credit on that.
Yeah, I mean, so I only know a little bit about the 7800, kind of the stuff that I've seen from some videos like Angry Video Game Nerd and stuff like in some history YouTube videos. The thing for me again is kind of has to do with just I can't think of really any game that has kind of come forward from the Atari generation anymore. Like, what is still being played that has its kind of roots in Atari?
Tempest. People love Centipede, Millipede.
All right, okay, I can kind of give you that. I feel like that's a stretch for, and I guess the other thing is, it actually came out later than both of these 2 other systems. So later than Nintendo, later than Sega Master System, and it just felt like an inferior console to both. So if we're gonna give Sega Master System a D, I have a hard time even giving this a B.
Well, I just say B because of the backwards compatibility.
All right, we'll leave it a B for now because otherwise Steve's going to get hurt from his nostalgia factor. And we'll see where all these other consoles come up because I think when we start getting to the real Bs, Steve's going to be like, all right, we can bump that down to a C. All right, TurboGrafx 16. Another classic. Where do we see this? Anybody have direct experience owning or playing this at a neighbor's or cousins or?
I mean, I had a neighbor that had one, and I was always envious of it. There are some absolute bangers on TurboGrafx. I mean, you have Bonk, you have Splatterhouse. Oh God, what was
that
the
spaceship one? I can't remember it.
There's a bunch of different vertical shooters. Like if you love vertical and horizontal shooters, like that's it. Like R-Type, I think was, or was it not Darius? But yeah, there is a really, really big side-scrolling shooter that started its life on the TurboGrafx. Well, I mean, Salamander, Life Force, that's it.
I don't even know what Life Force is.
It's a side-scrolling shooter. It's kind of similar to R-Type, but
I'm trying to remember the one where you were like this little spaceship and it was like bright colors and
Fantasy Zone? That's a Sega game.
Fantasy Zone.
That was on everything.
Okay, I remember my cousin having that and like the little cards. I thought that was really cool that you had like cards instead of like cartridges and you slid that in.
Speaking cards. Legendary Axe is another really awesome game.
Where are we seeing this though?
I
can't put it above 7800. I would put it below 7800.
I'd have to put it above personally.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to give it A, right?
No, it's not A. But I think like there's the TurboGrafx 16 has a lot of really cult classic games. Demon's Tilt.
Anthony Brown says they had the King of Fighters games. Really? That far back? I don't even remember that. I do remember Bonk. Bonk was pretty solid. I don't know, Steve. Where are you at on this?
Yeah, I had no exposure to this system, so I can't offer anything objective.
Well, John says
Yeah. Fatal
B.
Fury and Fatal Fury 2 are also on there.
Willito says C. TM says B. So okay, we'll leave it at B because I thought it was a little bit below. Zero thinks it's a little bit above, so we'll keep it a B for now.
If we're gonna have that at B, maybe we can bump 7800 down to C.
Ooh, okay, all right, but I don't know. Oh, well, let's leave it here for now. We only have 4. We'll see where the rest come in. All right, next, this is what I feel like is kind of the start of the real golden age of consoles, at least for me. And I thought this was like the first real console wars that started, where you were dividing your families and your friends upon whether you had a Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo. So Sega Genesis came out first. Where are we seeing this?
S.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was firmly in the Sega camp for sure.
I was a Genesis kid. Now, when we get to Super Nintendo, it'll be interesting because I was very jealous. But looking back, Sega Genesis just had so many great games. And, going back to what I said earlier about how a lot of the early 80s games translated super well on to the NES, like the Genesis was the place where you got the like arcade experience in like the late 80s. Like you got large sprites, you got like the game sounded a lot like they did in the arcade, looked a lot like they did in the arcade. We're talking Ghosts and Goblins, we're going to talk Strider, we're talking Altered Beast, Golden Axe. I mean, you got the arcade experience at home. And then
Ninja Gaiden was on that, right?
I don't think it was.
I might high.
Yeah, because the Ninja Gaiden arcade game was very different from what you got at home. There might have been a Ninja Gaiden. I know the Genesis version of Double Dragon was a lot closer to the arcade.
Yeah. See, no, it's okay. I wasn't high. So there was Ninja Gaiden on Genesis, and it was because I remember it being way better than the Nintendo port. Because the Nintendo port of Ninja Gaiden was very different, but the Sega Genesis one was much more arcade accurate. But I gotta agree. I mean, S tier. I was actually a Nintendo kid growing up, but my cousin, my slightly older cousin, he was like 2 years older than me. He was always a Genesis one, and people have said it. Sonic was obviously birthed
6-button controller, man. That was
Comic Zone.
What
was that one? Time.
Well, there's Time Killers.
Time Killers.
That was kind of an edgy fighting game. It wasn't the best, but like I think the Genesis was the home to sports games and fighting games.
Am I the only one that lost?
It didn't sound the best on the Genesis. They looked great, and that 6-button controller. And then don't even get me started on Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat on the Genesis.
Blood.
You had the blood. You had the 6-button controller, and Genesis also had their own. Like Sega had some really good exclusive games that like there's so much. You have cult classic games that like really just existed on the Genesis. I think Inutabi said the helicopter game. I think that was the EA Jungle Strike, Desert Strike. Those games were amazing. Jurassic, so the Sega version of Jurassic Park was awesome. The Sega version of Aladdin was great. And
I was going to say that the Disney games.
Yeah. Like the Aladdin on Sega Genesis actually had people from Disney that worked on it. They actually took animation cells and like translated those animation frames into the game. Whereas like the Super Nintendo version was developed by Capcom. And like this was an era where games were so different from one system to another. Earthworm Jim played better on Genesis.
Yeah, Earthworm Jim for sure.
Yeah, for me, the big thing with Genesis was just, again, all the sports games that were just so amazing.
Oh, yeah, Madden was really good on that, too.
Just that just blew me away.
The Sega hockey games were great, too. Yeah. Especially if you had Sega CD. Like, I had Sega CD, and I had like NHL 94.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that was just, it really made you feel like you're watching something on TV. It's really hard to explain today, because today you'd be like, that's so hokey. But back then it was
back then it was awesome. Yeah. Like I remember
presentation.
playing NHL 94. Oh, look at that. I remember playing NHL 94, and like the first time I was able to body check a player and you see him squirming on the ice a bit. And it was just awesome.
EA's futuristic sports games were great too. And then you also had Mutant League. I don't even think Mutant League was on Super Nintendo.
Oh yeah, Mutant League. Yeah. I'm just showing off my
I gotta fact check
Sega
myself.
Genesis Megatron Transformer, which I've never opened, but I only got it because of the crossover appeal from games and Transformers for me.
Mutant League did not make it over to the SNES. That was Genesis only, and that actually even had its own cartoon back in the day.
Yeah, I remember. I grew up like watching that. Oh man, that was so good. All right, so clearly S tier. It's not even a question. Let's move on to the next one, which is the other one, Super Nintendo. This is what I personally had, so I'm gonna say that this is S tier as well.
I
feel like there were so neck and neck. I felt like no other console war was as close as the Sega Genesis and SNES, and it was basically like it was a real true successor to NES in the sense that all the classics that you got in NES came back for Super Nintendo, and it came and it hit hard. They were bangers all over the place. You were like, Super Mario 3, how could they beat that? Well, Super Mario World. And it was so expansive. You're like, what is going on? Mega Man X, the X series. I love them.
Donkey Kong Country,
Oh,
Super Metroid, Link to the Past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was like no end to them. And as amazing as the original games were, the sequels were just so expansive. They were so much bigger. It like really showed how much bigger the world of gaming could be. Because the first time I played Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, and I was like, oh, this is the end, right? Nope. You're only halfway done with this game. It was ridiculous how much better these games were. And the graphical jump, again, was just amazing. It definitely felt like a next generation.
Yeah. I wish we had something above S tier.
Double S tier.
I hate to like be that guy to be like, this is the Super Nintendo. I'm biased here because it's my favorite system of all time. I grew up with the Genesis, and then I got the Super Nintendo in the early 2000s, like when Target had them clearanced out for like $30, and I got to enjoy these games. Like, wow, these are really, really good experiences. And Super Metroid is my favorite game of all time. The amount of stuff that game does and communicates without actually having like an in-your-face story is just incredible to me. And it's a game that I play every year. I play through it again. Like when a new year kicks off, I do a run through Super Metroid to like start my year off. I'm not kidding. And it's to me, there are just so many heavy hitters on that system, and just the way they hold up today is just astonishing to me. It's not every single game, but it's just amazing to me how much forward thinking was in the design of those games that just resonates today. And the system is, it's what, 32 years or 31 years old now.
Yeah, I find myself whenever I do like emulators, playing retro games, SNES is the one that has the most that I play again. Right. Like just like you said, Super Metroid, the Castlevania, Super Castlevania. Oh man, I can't even begin to remember how I can't even. I remember this is one thing. This is the first time I cried playing a game. I remember I was playing Street Fighter 2. And I couldn't beat M. Bison. And I remember sitting in my chair playing for like an hour, and I couldn't beat him. And I remember bawling my eyes out, going to the kitchen and telling my parents, I can't beat M. Bison. And they were like, it's a game. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, you don't understand me, Mom and Dad. This is my life. Like that I still remember that to this day. So S tier. if there was this double S tier, that definitely would be there for me, more so than even Nintendo, even though Nintendo was my first console. So we're all agreed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, now we're going to the fifth generation. And so continuing on, this was one of the ones that was I guess surprising, because we were expecting the Sega Saturn, the next generation Sega. We're expecting the next generation Nintendo, and then Sony comes out here and is like, "Yo, we can do this, right?" And people are like, "Nah, you can't do this, bro." And they come out and they hit hard. So let's start here with the Sega Saturn, a personal favorite of mine. If I would, I'll start this one off. I really want to give it an S class, but I think I'm gonna put it in A, just because we can't have all S's, and I think it's just a little bit below those. But I played the hell out of Sega Saturn because I was a fighting game player. All the Capcom games that were on there, X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Marvel superheroes, Street Fighter versus Marvel versus Street Fighter. Marvel vs. Street Fighter. The Darkstalkers games. I love Vampire Savior. I remember having the extra cart that you had to expand so you can play some games. I played the hell out of the Sega Saturn in high school with my cousin because we just played so many Capcom games, and that's what we played in an arcade. And it was like arcade perfect. Like it was like arcade perfect coming home and playing that. It was like having an arcade cabinet at home. So that's where I put it. There's probably a lot of other reasons why, but that's where I'm going to put it for now.
Steve, I'm going to let you say your piece on this one.
Yeah, I'd agree. A buddy of mine had the Saturn, so I played it a bit, and it was good. I had the Genesis, and I still thought that the Genesis seemed to be better overall for me. I mean, yeah, like the quality of the games was a bit more of a step up, but I don't know. There was just something about the Genesis games that really captured me, and yeah, it was good. But yeah, I mean, and yeah, everything can't be in the S tier. I agree. So
yeah,
I'm good with the A, but I also had limited exposure to it.
For me, it was limited exposure as well. I came off of the Genesis and I was looking for my next system, and I loved Sega when I came off of the Genesis, and so I was torn because in the magazines of the time, the N64 was like being portrayed as like the Titan system, but then there was also the PlayStation, which wasn't exactly an underdog, but it was like, wow, look at all these games. Like the PlayStation was games, and then value on top of it. So my experience with the Saturn was limited to a friend. The Saturn has a lot of great arcade games, a lot of great arcade ports, and as far as 2D games, it's a powerhouse. Again, I'm the minority here, so if it was me, I would give it a B, because there's great games on the Saturn. There's games that hold up today. Panzer Dragoon Saga, Clockwork Knight's a great one. A lot of the old Sega arcade ports, Virtua Cop, Virtua Fighter 2 is like an impossible port on Saturn. Fighting Vipers is a competent game. Daytona, USA, but it's not a system that I necessarily Knights too. It's not a system that I necessarily like view that high on my list, because again, like looking back, it was always like, well, PlayStation, N64, those were the systems that I tended to give more attention to. And then even now, like in the era of retro gaming and emulation, it's like there's some great games on the Saturn, but it's not like one that I hold super highly. So I'd be willing to let you guys give it an A, but for me, it's more of a B.
So a couple of other games that I think were really good. I think Sega had JRPGs that were so good, like
Shining Force was one.
Yeah, like all the whatever that company that made that Shining.
What? We're gonna go right into PlayStation. You want to talk about JRPGs, man?
Well, that's true, but that's what I'm saying. That's so I can possibly give it a B. But see, this is when I say, like, if I'm gonna put it a B, there's
You're
no
gonna
way
move
I'm
towards-
putting this in the same tier as TurboGrafx 16 and Atari. Like,
That's what I'm gonna say is like maybe those need to move down a tier.
see, I feel like these are like C tier. Like I feel like these need to come down if we're gonna put.
I would agree. In order to give it a B, I'd say the other two have to come down.
Yeah, that's definitely above the other two for sure.
Yeah, I played a lot of Dragon Force and what was that other one? Oh, that was like the side-scrolling JRPG where you could play as like the zombie soldier and like freak, I don't remember what his name is called. Oh, and then there was Gunstar Heroes. Do you guys remember playing that game? No, so you guys don't know.
Gunstar Heroes was a kind of a shooting game on Genesis.
Yeah, it's a 2-player shooting game, kind of like in the same kind of style as like Metal Slug in the sense that you could get different power-ups and do a 2-player co-op and you could switch weapons, have alternate weapons and stuff like that. All right, so we'll put it in a B tier. As much as I begrudgingly put it there, we'll put it in a B tier because I do think there probably are some A tiers. One that I think is coming up, PlayStation came out of the gate swinging from Sony, which was a household name for sure, but we didn't know how they were going to come out with this new console and the discs. You know, we were like, are this really better than cartridges? And Sega was doing it with the CD and the Sega Saturn. And Sony came out and, oh, man, like Tekken. I played a lot of Tekken. Like I've already told you, Tekken.
Yeah. Hey, who was your main in Tekken, by the way?
Oh, I played literally like almost the entire cast because I played Tekken from Tekken 1 all the way to Tekken 5, and then I skipped 6 in Tekken Tag, and then I played a little bit of 7 trying to get back. But I would say probably any of the Mishimas, Brian, Steve later on, Julia was always
Steve is definitely a Jin killer.
Yeah, so I played the majority of the cast. Oddly enough, I didn't play the Koreans because I'm Korean and I grew up very anti-Korean, so I didn't really play them. But PlayStation, I mean, Ridge Racer, I remember playing a lot of Ridge Racer.
Yeah, man.
A lot of Street Fighter Alpha. Final Fantasy. Come on.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 7, the first time you saw that demo disc with the Leviathan summon, you were just like, is this real life? Like, this can't be real. Yeah, I remember that. I can't. If you guys put it anywhere below A, I swear I'm just going to cut off the stream right now.
There's no way I could put it below A. And for me, it's got to be S tier just because of how many great, like, so the thing is, it's like, we often say, like, when are the next great franchises going to come? And I feel like PlayStation, like, was so instrumental in creating a lot of great new franchises, and the big, you know, as far as sequels like Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 9, you know, you had Chrono Cross on there. You know, it really stole the thunder from Nintendo. It stole that Square and Enix presence. You had Metal Gear Solid, you had the Tekken series, you had Mega Man Legends, you had the Mega Man X series continue on with X4, X5, X6. Final Fantasy Tactics was huge for people. Guys. Yeah, that was a big game at the time. One of my favorite games, Tomba. A lot of the new Sony franchises,
Tomb Raider. Tomb
Raider's another big one that found its life on the PlayStation. Resident Evil, Dino Crisis.
Oh yeah, how did I forget Resident Evil? Oh
yeah,
and Resident Evil 2 is like, again, like Resident Evil 2 and Super Metroid are like they're my two favorite games of all time, and you know, they found their home there. People love Bloody Roar, Wipeout. Jet Moto is a great game that people forgot about. Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. You know, it's a lot of stuff happened on PlayStation, and it was, to me, it was like the first time that 3D gaming was like super competent.
Yeah. All right, so we got to vote for S tier. I wouldn't be sad about putting it in S tier. Steve, where are you at?
Yeah, I could put it either an S or A, and I have to agree with Zero's point. Like that particular console was just a launching point for a lot of great franchises, and to me, that's a defining characteristic of where a console's going
Oh,
to
Twisted
sit.
Metal. Totally.
Twisted
Oh
Metal's a
yeah,
great
Twisted
one, too.
Metal, yeah. But I
And
remember
the 2D games, not as good as Saturn, but they were great there.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember the first time playing Resident Evil on that. Man, like I made the mistake of playing it with the lights out and playing it in the dark. And
I
oh man,
was in high school at the
Windows is
time,
great.
and I wouldn't play it. I would watch my cousin play it in the same room, but I refused to actually hold the control and play it because I was scared shitless. Oh
yeah,
man.
I had a few sleepless nights playing that game for sure.
All right, we're good there then. All right, Nintendo 64. I feel like this might be a divisive one. I think there's so many classics, but
I might upset people, but I'm gonna say B tier, right with Saturn.
I was gonna say the same thing. To me, the 64 was a letdown.
Yeah, you have some of the best games of all time, but when you look at the system and its games as a whole, it falls up short. It's like if you say well, what are the best games on the N64? You're gonna come up with a dozen games.
Yeah, I mean they're all bangers, but those are like the only reason why you own the console, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
other than that,
Mario
there's
64,
nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah, you could own that console and only have played Super Mario 64, and you would have been a happy person. But as far as the entire library, it definitely fell short, and especially following the SNES, which again elevated NES to another level. We were kind of expecting that with 64, but it was disappointing. There were some games that were just not that good.
Short because they didn't have cinematics, they didn't have voices, and things were very compressed. So it's like if you were to get the same games at the time that were available on PlayStation, you got so many more concessions on N64.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anthony said after GoldenEye, it's a mid-console. Yeah.
I would honestly, if it weren't for games like GoldenEye, for Mario 64, Mario Kart, Diddy Kong Racing, Conquer, Ocarina of Time. Again, like I said, it's probably about a dozen really good games on there. If it was not for those games being what they are, it would be C tier.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Yeah,
I would
sure.
definitely agree.
For sure.
All right, well, that was easy. I thought it might be divisive, but we are all in agreement. Everyone seems to think it's B class. All right, jumping into the next generation, coming out swinging. Sadly, the last true console from Sega, the Dreamcast, which hurts. And I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna put it in between B and C. I'm gonna have to put it top of C, but I think it's kind of like the Nintendo 64, the Sega consoles.
I'm gonna disagree.
I think it drops off.
I think it's an A-class system.
A-class?
I think it's an A-class system. You had a lot. This was Sega's swan song. I think they tried a lot of really cool experimental stuff on here. This was, you're going back like what was the arcade at home at this time? The Dreamcast and Naomi architecture was very similar.
Well, yeah, it was just basically a copy, yeah.
It was, exactly. It was basically a copy. You got a lot of arcaded home experiences. You got Power Stone, you got House of the Dead.
Crazy Taxi.
Crazy Taxi was another really good one. You got Virtua Fighter 3. I think they did a Fighting Vipers port on there. I don't think the system had enough time to really bake, but you got a lot of great 2D games, 2D fighters, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which is a game people are still wanting to buy today. The Alpha series, Street Fighter came out there. Dreamcast still has support today in the third-party community. People are still doing indie games for Dreamcast and still got the support. But, you had absolute bangers of the game. Sonic Adventure, you had Soul Calibur on there, you had Resident Evil Code Veronica, which in my opinion is the true Resident Evil 3. I think it's an A-tier system. I think that it was a really underutilized, and again, it was a victim of circumstance, but I think it's an amazing system.
All right, Steve, where are you at?
I'd have to say B, and the reason I say that, because I look at what this system was doing in comparison to its competitors at the time, and I
Even
just
with
felt Yeah, I don't know. It just didn't feel like a home run for me. To me, I'm not saying there were bad games, but maybe my personal expectations for that system were too high. And an analogy uses like if you go into this movie and you think, oh, this is gonna be the greatest movie ever, could still be a great movie, but it just didn't live up to the hype that you had built up, and it fell short in that regard. That
still
doesn't
think
mean it
A
was a
class.
bad system,
Yeah.
but I think it was a victim of timing too. I think it was just poor timing.
I think at the same time, though, we look at games today, and there's so many games that can't hit 60 frames a second. And one of the things about the Dreamcast was those games were pushing, 60 FPS. You were getting really smooth experiences. I remember a buddy of mine and we rented Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver on Dreamcast after playing the PlayStation one, just to see, whether it was different, how much better it was, and just experiencing a game at 60 FPS for the first time. I think the problem with the Dreamcast was it didn't exactly have the third-party support that that it needed. But at the same time, the Dreamcast pioneered so much stuff in terms of online gaming. Phantasy Star Online on the Dreamcast was my first experience with online gaming, and I loved it. And that system came out over 20 years ago. I mean, 1999, we had online gaming. You could easily add your friends. You could easily connect with people and play a game, even over dial-up. And it was also the first system to have voice chat. I remember Alien Front Online. It was just unreal to me that you had a game that did that. And here in 2022, the Nintendo Switch still doesn't want to support voice chat.
Yeah, I remember that other thing too. They had like that Fishman thing where you could talk to the microphone.
Yeah, with Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy was the narrator in that game. It's just a system that was ahead of its time, and it's not for everybody.
So I feel like that was the way with Sega in general. I felt like they were ahead of this time for a lot. Like I didn't talk about this with Saturn, but if you remember, the Knights controller was the first controller that had
analog.
the analog.
Yeah. Well, technically, it wasn't the first because Atari had analog controls. Well,
yeah, but like that kind of I guess form factor, if you want to call it that way. And then like the triggers on the Dreamcast were also the first of like that felt like real.
It had the VMU. I mean, the VMU was so innovative. It was an LCD. It was a dot matrix LCD, and you could have mini games.
Super memory card.
Yeah.
So I see. That's what I say. I think there's a lot of things that are great about it, but I think the biggest thing for me is that it relied too heavily on like the Sega catalog in the same way Nintendo did, and that it didn't have that third-party support, like you said. And for some reason, it just didn't get a lot of adoption. I feel like the Dreamcast got way more post, generation love than it did at its time, and it was not appreciated during its time.
Well, I think our next system is going to be the reason why.
All right. Well, so we had me at C. I actually bumped it up to B. Extra Zero convinced me. Zero had it at A, and Steve had it at B. So I think we'll settle here at B. I think PlayStation 2, you're already on the edge of your seat, Zero. So why don't you go first and let us know where you see the 2?
It's like it maybe should be an S tier, but I also feel like with the PlayStation 2, it's great. It's a great system, but we didn't get much new there. Like we got God of War. This is like the generation where we started getting like a lot of really refined franchises. Mm-hmm. And we did get a lot of great new franchises on PlayStation 2, but I don't think it was as revolutionary and monumental as what we got on PlayStation. I mean, PlayStation 2 is where you started getting sequels. You started getting like Metal Gear Solid 2, Parappa the Rapid 2. You got your Final Fantasy 10. You got Kingdom Hearts, which is a new series. You got Devil May Cry, Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, San Andreas. There were so many heavy hitters on this system, but to me, I don't know if it's a factor of age. They didn't stick out as much as they did on the original PlayStation.
It felt like more of an minor iteration of a console. Felt like a PlayStation 1.5, and I felt like in general this generation kind of was that. I felt like they came out too rapidly. Like now you're seeing console generations expand for nearly a decade, right? But between the PlayStation generation and the PlayStation 2 generation, it wasn't that long of a time period. So I think that's why we feel like it's kind of a in between console. I'm putting it A. I don't know where you said that you felt it went 0.
I want to say S, but I can't because again, there's great games on there, and there's some I didn't mention, like Ratchet and Clank originated there, Jack and Daxter, Sly Cooper. But at the same time, I can't say that it's like up there in terms of like these are games that like the PlayStation 2 games. I don't want to go back and play. Like they're not games that are they don't necessarily withstand the test of time. But I still love them. But they're not like Super Metroid or the first Metal Gear Solid or
I agree. So I mean, are we saying A here, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I echo those sentiments. When the first PlayStation came out, again, that was such a big change with the PlayStation 2. I picked it up, got a ton of games off of it. It was great, but yeah, there wasn't as much of the wow factor with the PlayStation 2 compared to the first PlayStation.
That being said, I remember I was in college. I think it was my freshman year, I want to say. Yeah, it was my freshman year when it came out, and this was the console that I did spend a lot of my college time. It was the first console that I remember people like camping out for, this.
I was one of them.
Oh, you were? Yeah, like my college roommate and we went out and we camped at Best Buy, and there were people with tents, and like I don't remember if that happened before that. Maybe I just didn't realize because I was younger.
It happened for N64.
It did?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
at least where I live.
I just remember PlayStation 2 just being like everyone on the news. You couldn't drive by a Best Buy and not see a line outside the door and everything like that. But I agree. I think we're good with it being A tier. A successful sequel to the PlayStation built upon it, but it was not, as we said, a revolutionary experience. So we're going to leave it at A. I definitely think it sits above where we have the B tier folks, the Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, because while it did have a lot of first party stuff, unlike those three, which I think share the same kind of pitfall in that it didn't have as much third party support, PlayStation 2 definitely did. All right, next up, Nintendo GameCube.
This was a system I camped out for.
You can't what?
This is a system I camped out for.
You camped out for? So where are we playing?
I got on launch day. And I love this system. However, I'm going to take off the rose-colored glasses, and I'm going to say it's a B-tier system. It has a lot of really good games, but it has a lot of pitfalls. Because like with the PlayStation 2, one of the things we didn't talk about in it being A tier is the fact that it was revolutionary at its time for being a DVD player. So, maybe like with the Saturn and the PlayStation, we didn't really talk about this, but at the time you could play music CDs on them just like you could on the Sega CD.
Right.
And that was a big deal for some people. Like, hey, this is a multifunction unit. With the PlayStation 2, it was like, hey, DVD discs, they're coming out. They're replacing VHS. They're higher definition. I can play them. The GameCube Nintendo said, no, we're not going to do that. They opted for smaller discs, which again, like that was one of the reasons why the PlayStation 2 beat the Dreamcast, the DVD playback functionality. Dreamcast used GD-ROMs, which were a higher capacity disc than CD-ROMs. They just did not for DVD. So PlayStation 2 was a better value proposition. And not only that, but the GameCube games had to make some concessions because they were on smaller discs. Mm-hmm. So you had games like the Resident Evil remake come on 2 discs, the Metal Gear Solid remake come on 2 discs. And that's another thing too about the GameCube is there were a lot of remakes on there. There were a lot of games on the GameCube that, to this day, nobody's attempted. Eternal Darkness was a very revolutionary title. Luigi's Mansion, people didn't necessarily like it at launch, but it's got a cult following now.
Oh yeah.
Rogue Squadron, Rogue Leader, they're really, really competent Star Wars spaceship shooters. Metroid Prime 1 and 2. It's like the N64 almost. Wind Waker. There's so many cult games on it. It's like to give it a B might seem like it's a disservice, but the hardware wasn't everything it could be. And again, it's about the sum of its parts. Like the N64 has maybe like a dozen really good games. The GameCube maybe has like 2 to 3 dozen really good games. So again, it kind of seems like a disservice to do it a B, but if we're looking at the grand scheme of all these consoles, it kind of has to be there in my opinion, because it didn't really do anything revolutionary. It didn't have online, even though it had all the add-on ports. There was a Game Boy Player expansion for it, but again, Super Nintendo did that. You play your Game Boy Advance games on the GameCube, Game Boy games on the Super Nintendo. And again, I love the GameCube, so it kind of pains me to put it that low. But again, the other thing too that was a concession on it was the controller. It had a really odd layout. Animal Crossing, Inu Tabi said Animal Crossing. That's a great game that was revolutionary, but it made weird decisions that keep it from being an A tier in my opinion.
Well, it was definitely interesting because like I don't know why Nintendo wanted to do this, but it did make a significant impact on like their controller design, even with the Nintendo 64 with the weird third, I don't know, handle in the middle. They got away from that, but then they had like the asymmetrical kind of analog controllers. But yeah, the controllers were always felt weird, and honestly, I felt like the GameCube was basically just a Smash system. Like
it became that for a lot of people, and it sucks too because it had good versions of games. So like we're talking about like N64 and how the third party support sucked, but on the GameCube, like you had like some really cool third party support. Like let's take Soul Calibur 2 for example. They had Link as the bonus character, but then you're hindered by playing Soul Calibur 2 on that GameCube controller. Don't get me wrong, I love the GameCube controller for certain games, but not for a fighting game. See, you'd have to get a fighting stick in order to make it a viable system. You know,
I mean, I think the fact that they went back to being a more basic controller after that and have kind of, for a standard controller. Kind of makes sense why they felt that they probably misstep there. But Steve, what about you? Are you good with it being a B?
Yeah, I'm in the same category. I mean, I just remember when it came out, and again, not to say, there were good games, but it just didn't wow me. And I know some friends of mine had it; they loved it, but I just looked at it and I'm kind of like, it's okay. Yeah, there's there's some good stuff there, but it just never floored me in any way.
And I think it also ends up, you have to put it there because I think as we put PlayStation 2 in A, and I think the next one we're putting up, I would think personally, even though I didn't own one, Xbox would also be an A. We'll argue that, but in comparison to its colleagues, its classmates, like even with those positives, like it was definitely outshone by both the PlayStation 2 and Xbox in that generation.
Agreed.
This system, this Xbox does online better than the Nintendo Switch does today. This was a system where this was online on a console done right. And I have so many great memories of playing games like Mech Assault and Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow and Halo 2 and Crimson Skies on this system. And it's just like, man, playing online in those days, and then they'd come out of nowhere and be like, hey, here's a DLC with a couple new levels. But playing Halo 2 on there primarily, like Mike Rogers is like, Xbox was an S. And I part of me wants to say it was, but again, there were some concessions here where it's like it wasn't exactly perfect. And I love the fact that the games, like, it had a hard drive in the system. It utilized it. It did stuff that the other two systems at the time could not do. I mean, you had ports of Doom 3, Half-Life 2 running on Xbox. You could not dream of getting those on GameCube or PlayStation 2.
It was
You
like
know,
the first time you felt like you actually had like a PC
yeah,
equivalent as opposed to a gaming console, right? I felt like that was what put me in A here, but I guess for me, I had to leave it in A because I don't think it's superior than the PlayStation 2.
controller again was another issue, I think, and I don't think that the Duke or the Controller S was as good as the PlayStation 2 controller. I don't think that they were consumer friendly with how they did DVD playback, and I don't think that the third party support was as good as what it was on PlayStation 2.
So
Yeah,
we're putting
yeah.
in the A.
I still think it belongs in A. I think that I think there's a few things holding it back from S. I think there's a few things holding PlayStation 2 back from S, but I still think that they are monumental consoles that'll be remembered forever. And I think that the Xbox is probably the best sophomore or the best freshman effort outside of the NES that the gaming world's ever seen.
Ooh, that's I don't
But I
know.
don't think it's S tier.
Man, that I feel like Sony had PlayStation was the best fresh. Oh, you mean soft? Do you say sophomore effort?
I meant freshman effort,
Okay.
but I mean PlayStation is arguable. But I think like the PlayStation, Sony was tied with Nintendo almost. So maybe I'm BSing my way here, but I think like Sony had their hands in the console market before Microsoft really. Well, maybe it's negligible because Microsoft also did help with a lot of console games. So maybe you're right. I think maybe it's disingenuous to say that when Sony's PlayStation was probably the best freshman effort next to
Yeah,
the
it's an S.
NES.
We just agreed it's an S tier, and Xbox is an A. Come on. All right. So let's move on next to the. I don't even know what generation this is now, but it's the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and the Wii generation. So starting with 360, Steve, why don't you kick us off? Where do you think the 360 goes?
I'd put that in the A tier as well. I think with the 360 again, I'm kind of looking at some of these later consoles and looking at how they stack up to their peers at the same time, and around the time frame of the PS2 and the PS3, I was firmly in the PlayStation camp. I mean, ironically, I'm in the Xbox camp now. But back then, I just thought, and this is one part of gaming that I hate today. When you talk about exclusives and you look at the library of games overall,
Red
and
Ring of Death.
PlayStation just had
Yeah.
such an advantage over Xbox at that time. Not to say that Xbox was a bad console by any stretch, but I think just one extreme factor of just the game library at that time put PlayStation far ahead in my mind.
I would like to say A tier, but again, Red Ring of Death is up here. And also
Yeah.
the fact that the PlayStation 3 didn't start off as strong, but it did pick up pace. And outside of your Halos, Forza, and Gears of War, for me, it's hard to really go back and remember what sets the Xbox 360 above the PlayStation 3. When the PlayStation 3 had a lot of heavy hitters. I mean, this is where you saw Uncharted. This is where you saw Infamous. This is where you saw Ni no Kuni. This is where you saw Resistance. So I want to say that the Xbox, if it were not for the Red Ring of the Death and the fact that I went through 8, and I'm talking 8 of those systems.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I would give it an A because it had a really great online experience. But my another issue I had with the 360 was the way they would change the UI. I thought that the system started off very strong with the blades, and then they changed it to a kind of a jumbled mess.
Yeah,
And,
a friend of mine had the same comment on it back then. He couldn't get over that.
And I did love Gears of War. I played a ton of Gears of War online.
Me too.
1, 2, and 3. I played a lot of that, especially 3. 1 and 3 I played a lot of, but I have to give it a B because my experience with the system was soured over the reliability and the fact that there weren't that many great franchises on there that were exclusive to the system. I still have my PS3. It's actually in my office here, and looking back
still
on it,
works.
3D God Heroes, God of War 3, Killzone 2 and 3, Little Big Planet kicked off on there.
Oh yeah,
my
that was a
God,
great
yeah.
game.
It's like the
Man.
start of like the meta gaming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid 4, Red Dead Redemption on
Damn, Metal
So-
Gear Solid 4 was on PlayStation 3. I guess that makes sense.
it was on PlayStation 3, yeah.
Yeah,
So compared to the Xbox 360, I just
yeah,
you know,
PS3 is superior for sure.
I definitely felt like, the second outing from Xbox, we were expecting a lot and they kind of fumbled the ball here. I
Yeah.
agree. I would put it in B as well. And again, that's specifically comparing it to the next one up, which I think is an A. I don't think it's in the S tier.
no, it's not in the S tier, but it's I already said my piece on all those games that came out for it, and I still have mine hooked up over here.
I still have my PlayStation 3 as well. I mean, I have a lot of these consoles
Yeah.
still, but PlayStation 3, I remember that's the console, another console that I camped out for. I was a PlayStation. I still am on Team PlayStation, even though I've owned basically all the Xbox systems. The thing that I remember about the 362 was you had to get like the DVD player attachment. And I was like,
well, no,
Wow,
that was
yeah.
Xbox.
was that
360
Xbox?
played it out of the box.
Was it? Oh man,
Yeah,
was
there
it?
is an
Yeah,
HD
I don't
DVD
remember if
player.
it did or not.
Yeah.
Oh man, maybe I'm
But-
misremembering.
Yeah, it was an HD DVD player attachment, but PlayStation.
Oh,
3's
HD
played-
DVD player.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. HD DVD player.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but I can play like Blu-rays on my
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
it felt weird. And like I know they were I remember it was a big thing about the price comparison between the two. And there was
Yes.
like a whole thing about, well, the PlayStation is way more expensive. And I'm like, well, if you want the equivalent HD DVD player, which
Yeah.
that fizzled out like that. I don't remember any other.
Yeah, well, I had it, and
I did too.
yeah, and then I ended up selling my HD DVDs on eBay after that fizzled out. The only one I couldn't sell was Knocked Up, so I still have that Knocked Up HD DVD. But the thing about HD DVDs that was actually pretty cool is one side was a standard DVD and the other side was an HD DVD.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, hey, if you buy this, you can play it on your DVD player. You can play it on your PlayStation 3 if you so choose, just one side.
So Mike Roger also pointed out the PlayStation
That's not
3.
true. The launch models, the 20 gig and the 60 gig did backwards compatibility. Then they did a 60 gig. And the last one that did backwards compatibility was the MGS4 bundle. And then after that, they did a version of the fat model that didn't do it.
Yeah.
And then they did the slim model, which nixed it all together.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was really cool. I remember that being one of those big things. And again, being a legacy PlayStation owner with PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1 library, I was like, oh man, this is like a no-brainer for me. And again, Sony was smart. Just as the same way they did with the PlayStation 2 and having a DVD player built in, for $300, or you could buy a dedicated DVD player for $300. Like, why
or more at most places. Like when it first came out,
it wasn't the best DVD player, but I mean, still, and kind of
no, it actually was one of the best. That was the thing about it is it was one of the best DVD players, and it was you got the gameplay compatibility because those UIs and a lot of the early DVD players, because I had a DVD player before I had a PlayStation 2. I was a Dreamcast guy. And when I got my PlayStation 2, it was a breath of fresh air.
Really? I remember it being slower, like slower for some reason, and having.
And I had a Sony DVD player on top of that. Yeah.
But in any case, I feel like we all agree PlayStation 3, A tier, sits above Xbox 360. The next one, I think this is the first one we're going to be revisiting that sneaks into the S tier, the Wii. And I think if you go by like console sales and speed, I feel like I could maybe let it go for an A, but I feel like there's. I remember Wii just being the console where you're like, oh, this is a different side of gaming that I haven't experienced.
Yeah.
And with you could just say the motion controllers, but I don't think it's that simple. I think the
It's
attention
complex.
to detail and rethinking how you can game without doing it in the traditional manner, and the interactions that you can do with games that were made available through this controller and the pointing system. Playing certain games like Okami on that versus playing on the PlayStation with the analog controllers, it was a different experience. The Resident Evil 4 playing with that felt like the best experience, where you had the gun and everything like that. For me, I think I would have a hard time arguing that it's not S tier for me. So I'll leave it at that. Let you guys go next.
Steve, you want to go first?
Yeah, I agree in terms of putting it in the S tier. And for me, the biggest reason for that is, again, that to me was the first system that came out that really incorporated group gameplay in certain games. And that was the system that had like the party style games, so you could just get a bunch of people together and they'd all take turns and everyone just had a blast playing it. Like, I remember friends of ours had it, and we'd be playing tennis, for example, like, and just like all the party style games where you could get a group of people together and just have so much fun. And that was such a different experience from either PlayStation or Xbox at the time. To me, that was a huge leap. And even though I didn't own the system, friends of ours had it. But
I
whenever
think
we went over
on that, it was the first system that I felt like non-gamers were like crazy about.
But my wife, because she's not a gamer, and we'd go over and play Wii tennis, and my wife was saying to me, like, coming home from their house, and she's like, yeah, maybe we should pick up a Wii. That was really fun.
Wii bowling, oh my god.
Wii bowling, like all those kinds of games were just fantastic. and it was just the experience that was so different that to me sets Wii apart from a lot of other systems.
I feel like Zero let us go first because he has a strong opinion outside of us.
Mm-hmm.
I would say an 8. And this is a system I waited in line for. This is a system that I enjoyed. I think it did some cool stuff, but I think, again, rose-colored glasses. It had some really cool games that were innovative. Wii Sports. I love Excite Trucks. Mario Galaxy is probably one of the best Mario experiences. But I think outside of a few core experiences, again, it's the sum of its parts. It did kick off the Virtual Console, and I think that before the show we were talking about how N64 games are, and N64 games are games that are difficult to emulate, and I think that it did a good job with its Virtual Console and giving you like, hey, backwards compatibility is one thing, but hey, look, you can get all these different systems here. So there were a good selection of games on the Wii. However, the Wii original games, I don't think have enough standout and memorable titles. There were, again, like you mentioned, Okami, Resident Evil 4, there are great ways to play them there. But, looking back, it's like, well, hey, now we have Resident Evil 4 VR. We have Resident Evil 4.
Come on, this is like 15 years.
I get that. But, I mean, again, like, in order for something to be an S tier, it's like, how does it stand today?
I would still love. I think. Oh man, I'm
here to challenge you. I'm here to challenge you.
I don't know. Like I still don't think, like, even with the newer systems now, like, again, if you're looking strictly at the quote unquote quality of the games and comparing what was on a Wii at the time to a PlayStation or Xbox, certainly the game quality maybe wasn't the same, but But you didn't have that atmosphere with like the Wii was the party system, and we just had a blast with that. We really
Come on,
did.
Man. You're agreeing with Mike Rogers here. He's had some.
I agree with Mike Rogers a lot. I'm sorry.
Xbox and S tier. Come on, get And
No.
I think he put 360 in S tier too. So
I can't put 360 in S tier. You know me.
I think the fact that like T-Man said too, right? Like they had Twilight Princess that you can play also in GameCube. But it came out on
I
Wii.
thought the GameCube version was better
What?
because it wasn't flipped. Link's got to be
Oh,
left-handed.
you need a left-handed Link, really?
Yes, sir. I need a left-handed Link, and I think motion controls are great when done right.
They were done right, though. They were
not
done
in every
right.
game. Not in every game. I feel like there are a lot of games where they are forced, and I think that that was one of the things that hindered the Wii is that Nintendo had this mindset, kind of like how the N64, like again, like when we gushed about PlayStation, we talked about like, well, hey, there were some really good 2D games on PlayStation. N64 was like, we don't want 2D games. Like Troublemakers was a game that they had a hard time getting on N64 because it was a 2D game. I feel like
these people are talking about the Miiverse and everything like being able
the
Avatar.
Miiverse kicked off later. I mean, well, technically there was the Show Your Wii. The Miiverse was Wii U.
Well, I mean, the fact that you can customize
there
your
were some
avatar.
really innovative things on the Wii,
on.
but I just think it's held back by a lot of really odd decisions that Nintendo made. Again, this is a system where you had to do friend codes. Again, you had a really good version of Mario Kart, but think about how great it would have been if you could have chatted with friends. Like the 360, which we're putting to be, had a really awesome, amazing online system that puts the Nintendo Switch to shame. In contrast, we had Smash Brothers Brawl had broken online on the Wii. Mario Kart Wii was not the best online. Animal Crossing had you had to get this little box that went on top of your TV to do voice chat.
I feel like you're trying to nitpick the things that
I'm not trying to nitpick. I'm trying to be objective here. I'm trying to say, like, it's difficult for me to call it an S tier system when the competition at the time was doing stuff that I think exceeded what it was doing.
But I don't think that was the point. I think that was a conscious effort, though, right? Like,
I don't think they were trying to go. Yeah, I don't think they were trying to go toe to toe with the game quality per se, or things like that.
That's still where they are now, right? With the Switch.
That's where they are now. But I just think that it holds them back. In my personal opinion, I think it holds them back.
All right. Well, we'll be here forever. We got 2 passes and 1 vote for A. That is clearly wrong. So we're just gonna move past this.
To disagree on this one.
Yeah. All right. All right, next up is the Wii U, which I sadly owned, and I'm gonna put this down in I'm gonna put this down. I don't want to put it with C, but I feel like it's a C.
I would.
I got so little value out of this.
Yeah.
Outside
of you guys are being generous. I'd give it an E.
Mario 3D World and
that system was a huge letdown.
Yeah. And
I feel like they tried, and like the tablet thing does work in some ways, and I thought it was clever. It just didn't pick up steam, and I mean, the Switch is the ultimate implementation. That's what the Wii U wanted to be, but it really wasn't.
I'm going to give it an E because of that. I'm going to say that an E, because I feel like those games work so much better on the Switch by cutting out that stupid gimmick of the tablet. I feel like the Switch is what the Wii U wanted to be and could never be. And I feel like they shoehorned so many gimmicks into this system. It had no identity because of its crappy name and the fact that the tablet was a hindrance to games. It stopped them from being fun. And you play the same. And I owned a Wii U. I got one on launch day. And to me, playing the same games on the Switch is a breath of fresh air. They feel like new experiences. And it's like it amazes you how much it's like basically like being asked to run a marathon with a cast on and then running that same marathon without a cast.
But Teammate says, but it had,
But it had
Star
Star,
Fox
oh, it had a
Zero.
Star Fox that felt like you broke both of your thumbs because you had to like do inverted, like the Star Fox on that system was so hindered by the controller because you had to like look at your TV and look at the tablet, look at your TV and look at the tablet. That wasn't fun. I just want a regular Star Fox experience. And as somebody that's like partially disabled, I have one functional eye. Like it was not cool playing that game on a tablet.
So I feel like it's one of those things where, again, it came feel kind of like Sega, where it was ahead of its time. I see where they're going with the tablet. Obviously, that's where gaming has gone, and just
it's saying it's ahead of its time, like saying the Tiger R Zone is ahead of its time.
No,
for
but
augmented reality.
It was stretched. We weren't there yet with the technology, and so I'm okay. I can't put it at E. I feel like E is super harsh, but I feel like I can put it.
I say throw it in the gulag. You need me on this one.
What about you, Steve? Are you at D, E, C?
I'd say D at the most. I'm not sure about E, but
third-party
definitely
games
no higher than D.
Third-party games did not run very well on the system either.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
even the ones that were made
just games did not run very well on the system, and that would have been fine.
Like Zombie U and Batman Arkham Origins did not run well at all in there.
I mean, they tried to make it interesting with like Batman with like the see-through thing and everything like that. It just didn't.
Yeah, they tried, but it unfortunately didn't work.
Yeah, I feel like it was a lot more to manage because, again, as a second screen, I don't think the second screen idea panned out. It should have just been the main screen, and they made it more of a companion screen. So all right, we'll leave it in D. I think we don't need to beat a dead horse. Poor Wii U, but everyone agrees it's pretty awful. All right, I feel like this next console generation is a really good one as well. The previous one, I guess it's still going on right now. We can still say, but PlayStation 4. Where are we putting this, folks?
If you're gonna give the Wii an S, I gotta say PS4 is an S.
We're gonna put it an S, Steve.
Well, this is the generation where I switched from PlayStation to Xbox. So, I mean, it's a great system for sure, but I decided to try out Xbox not because I didn't think that the PS4 was good, but I had the first 3 generations of the PlayStation, and I just wanted to try something different. I could see it being in an S for sure because it was still a great system and great games. I just wanted to try something different.
I think it sits between these two. I don't think it's as revolutionary as literally any of the systems that we have in S right now.
Oh yeah, no,
so that's why I shy away from putting it in S. I would say like a high A. I think it's the best of the A's.
Yeah, like or A+ per se.
I will give it an S because it introduced home VR. I think that you also had a lot of really good new franchises and reinventions of franchises. You had God of War, you had Horizon, you had Uncharted 4, you had The Last of Us. Well, technically, The Last of Us came out on PlayStation 3, but it really shined on PlayStation 4. This was where, again, like with that generation with PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, like you had really choppy 30 FPS games. The PlayStation 4 introduced games with a higher fidelity and better frame rates. And I feel like it was like that generational leap from 8-bit to 16-bit where, the games really are going to stand the test of time. And the games started looking more like CG movies than video games. And, you had the Spider-Man series, you had Days Gone. I just feel like I had so many great experiences on my PlayStation 4 that, in the last generation, and again, since the PlayStation 2 generation, I've owned really since the PlayStation 1 generation. I can't say it because I didn't own a Saturn at the time, but since the PlayStation 2 generation, I've owned all the iterations of consoles. And to me, the PlayStation 4 is just like, it's kind of like on that level of Super Nintendo in terms of generational quality increase. And I definitely love the VR on that. I had some great times with Astrobot Rescue, Until Dawn, Rush of Blood. A lot of those Sony games that are kind of like the David Cage games, like Until Dawn was fantastic, and then I replayed Heavy Rain and the one with Willem Dafoe and um, got Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human.
Mm-hmm.
There are just a lot of really cool experiences on PlayStation 4 that I personally had. And those are God of War, like I already mentioned, was definitely one that's going to last a lifetime. That's one of the best games I've ever played. So
I also think the library is phenomenal. That I put a lot of time into the PlayStation 4, even as an adult. But all that said, I just don't see it being that revolutionary step. Aside, I didn't consider PlayStation VR, which I do have. It's over here or whatever. But I got that a little bit later after it was released. And I felt it was. See, I think my view of it is probably skewed because I didn't get it right when it came out. I only got it like a year and a half ago,
yeah,
and
I got
then
it
there
right
are
when it
other
came
VR
out. So,
experiences that are obviously much better since then.
yeah.
Um, but the games you mentioned, they're all bangers. The Last of Us, one of my favorite games of all time. Horizon, who T-Man got me into. I didn't even know about that game. I got that and played that after the complete version came out because I was talking to T about how I love Breath of the Wild. And he was like, well, if you love Breath of the Wild, you'll like this Horizon game. I was like, what is this
Definitely
game?
play
I
Days
never fucking
Gone.
even heard of it. Even though it came out like a week before or a week after Breath of the Wild. So that's what I'm saying. It's really hard, but I feel like the defining factor for me is like I felt like all these had something more revolutionary than what I felt with the PlayStation 4, which I felt like was just the best of its generation.
Right. I just say to me, it's like revolutionary in the sense that the Super Nintendo is revolutionary over the NES. It just gave you those smoother experiences and it did new things. It was like the PlayStation 3 had online, but I think for the PlayStation 4, it was where it was actually competent.
Yeah, that was the first PlayStation that actually had good
Yeah.
online. All right, so we got an S here. I got an A here. Where did you put it, Steve? I feel like Steve's
I,
always the deciding factor here.
I put it in A, and when we get to the Xbox One, I'll kind of harp on that a bit.
All right, well then let's start off with you, Xbox One.
So I'm gonna put it in S. This is the first console that I shifted to Xbox, and the only reason I put it in that tier is Game Pass. That is such a phenomenal experience in terms of when we talk about online. It's just a great way to game, and I just it's just a phenomenal way to game for me. It's changed how I use my system, and with Sony, I mean again because I'm not in the ecosystem now. I think they're working on something similar. I don't know if they actually do have something out there yet.
They
Apparently,
had
it's coming out
PlayStation
this
Now
week.
for some time,
Yeah.
but they don't market it very well.
Yeah, and you hear about Game Pass, and the thing is just the value that Game Pass delivers. Like for and then using my crazy Canadian money, for like $15 a month,
Right.
just the value that you get out of it. And to me, Game Pass was a real fundamental shift in terms of what I think what console gaming is going to be going forward. Because I don't think that consoles themselves are going to go away, but just the fact that you can combine the console experience with online and have online that functions really well and is reliable, that to me is what puts it in that tier. Uh, you know, people can make arguments about the game libraries and this and that, and I hate the whole topic of exclusives, but that's the reality of the world today, and that's not going to change. But I mean, for me, like I can get all of the types of games I like. My main types of games are sports games. So now that MLB The Show is out on Xbox, I can get pretty much every sports game I want, whether I have an Xbox or PlayStation.
It's important to mention that you said 15 a month, so you're doing the Games Pass Ultimate, which includes the EA access.
Yes,
So, yeah.
yes, and that is just it's such a tremendous value, and on top of that, it's reliable because it could be a great system and have a lot of great titles. If it doesn't work, then it's meaningless. Game Pass works phenomenally well. And to me, that is such a shift. That's why I put it in the S tier.
All right, Zero. What's your take on the Xbox One?
I would put it in the B tier. Now, I'm biased on this a little bit, and don't get me wrong, I do like Xbox. I want to preface this with I have one PlayStation 5 and I have 3 Xbox Series consoles. I have an Xbox Series X in my basement. I have an Xbox Series X in my living room, and I have an Xbox Series S in my office. I also have a PC in my office. I love Games Pass Ultimate. I think, as Steve mentioned, it's a great value. That said, I don't think that the games are necessarily worthy of making it an S tier ranking. With the Xbox One, again, I'm not a Sony pony. I own everything. I find that I'm frequently updating my systems. I find that like when I have friends over or when my fiance and I want to fire up a game, it wants to update. We have 1 gigabit Ethernet connection going to our systems, and it'll want to update. I feel like Don Matrick really soured the brand, and again, this isn't a technological thing, but when it really took for the it took some UI or some software updates to fix the Xbox One, and I feel like once they untethered Connect and they made it so that the UI didn't necessarily require picture-in-picture, they brought it more up to snuff with the PlayStation 4, but I still think it was a little bit hindered. I don't think that the UI experience is the best, and I don't think that Xbox Game Studios is on par with what Sony's putting out. So for me, I really feel like the Xbox One is a B. That the next one might surprise you, but I'm sorry, I don't think it's an S. I think that the what I think about the series might surprise you, but the Xbox One I think had a lot of hurdles, and I think it's a little bit of a hindered system and a little bit of a hindered ecosystem, and I think that the UI holds it back. The UI also, in my opinion, somebody that owns all 3 systems from that generation isn't as snappy as it could be, and I feel it's a great system, a competent system, but I still think it's a B.
So my take is kind of both worlds, right? Like I understand what Steve is saying, understand what Zero is saying. For me, I felt like this is probably one of the closest console wars that we've had where you could be on either side and everyone was like, okay, I see that, right? Steve, as far as like the Game Pass equivalent, apparently rumors are even saying Sony might announce it next week, their equivalent, which will kind of merge PlayStation Now and PlayStation Plus, whatever that may be. But I think as Zero has said, the games that we got and the plethora of A tier games, AAA games that we got from PlayStation kind of balance out what we get from Game Pass, which is like a value, but I feel like it's kind of like for PlayStation Plus for me. Like you get all these games every month, but not all of them are awesome, right? So for someone like me who doesn't game all the time, I would never be able to realize all that value when I have such a kind of a limited time and more focus on what I want to explore. So I think if you I think it depends on where you are in your like kind of gaming genre, or I don't know, like your relationship with gaming, right? If you're a little bit more casual, you might enjoy being able to try jump in and out of the bunch of games that you have for the few months with Game Pass. For me, I basically will play a game and just play the hell out of it, like like with Horizon or Spider-Man, and I'll go deep in on that one game for like weeks, if not months, and that's how I enjoy my gaming experience. As
to interject real quick, I do think Games Pass does give you an opportunity to try games you wouldn't necessarily have tried before.
Right. But if I'm only going to be dedicating, a couple hours a week, or even if it's 10 hours a week, I'm going to dedicate it to the games that I know I wanted to buy, because there's only so many games a year that I know I'm really going to play, like Last of Us, Horizon, whatever it may be. And I'll dedicate all my time to that, as opposed to trying out, 40 games throughout the year. Like, I just don't, for me personally, that's why I would put it in like the same league. It just depends on what the type of gamer you are. So I felt like this console generation was really close. So I'm going to split the vote between S for you, Zero. Oh, no, for you, Steve, and B for you, Steve. I'm going to put it at A. I think it's not better than PlayStation 4 and not worse than PlayStation 4. Just different experiences and different value propositions, which is great. So, all right. We're going to the last one of that generation, and this was, again, a kind of a generational crosser, because we're getting that OLED and slightly different enhancements that we're getting with this console. But the Nintendo Switch, where do we see this shaping up in
Man,
our lineup?
I see it as an S. And I say that because the Switch is a very versatile system. And, even though it's technologically underpowered, we're still getting games on it that, like, we got Witcher 3 on it, we got Doom Eternal on it, you have Skyrim on it, and it worked as advertised, as far as being able to pop it right off the dock, and the moment you take it off the dock, that game is right on your handheld. We didn't have any handheld systems on this ranking, because I'd love to cut it up about the 3DS and the DS with you guys, and the PSP and the Vita. But to me, like, the Switch is the ultimate handheld system, because I've always had an affinity for handheld gaming. I'm someone that had a Game Gear, a Game Boy. I had the Gamecom, if you remember that. I'm looking forward to the Steam Deck, and to me, like, the Switch was just a product that, like, it was like, no way, that's real. It works as advertised. It has that Nintendo magic. It has some of the best games of all time. We put the Wii U in that D category, but so many of the games, like, shined on the Switch. Mario 3D World, you had Pikmin 3, Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. Those were games that were amazing, that were on the Wii U, and they come on the Switch, and they're way better. We're just really waiting on that Ocarina. I'm sorry, the Wind Waker HD port. We got Skyward Sword on there. Granted, that was a Wii game. I feel like the Switch is just a really amazing system where there's something for everybody. It's so versatile. I love the way that the Joy-Cons work. I love the fact that you can just pop the Joy-Cons off. You've automatically got 2 players for a lot of games out of the box. So it's got, aside from that hybrid model, it's got that innovation where, hey, there's many ways to play these games. You can have 2 sets of Joy-Cons and have 4 players. They took a lot of the classic Nintendo franchises, Smash Brothers and Mario Kart. Mario Kart 8 was one that was on Wii U that just is so much better on the Switch, and it's still getting support. And the online on there isn't perfect, but I think that the innovation, like the Switch, despite being less powerful than the PS4 and Xbox One, and then respectively the PS5 and the Series consoles, it can do. And I respect the hell out of that.
Yeah, I have to agree. We've got the Switch as well, and that's basically my son's system. And it just blew his mind the first time when he's playing it connected to the TV. And then we're going on a road trip, and we told him, well, okay, just pop it into your, put on your controllers. He could play it in the car, and his mind just exploded. He couldn't get past it. And, and it works, the Switch isn't trying to be a PS4 or an Xbox One or a PS5 or an Xbox Series console. It knows what it wants to do, and to me, it does it perfectly.
And they don't have Games Pass, but what they've done for their the NES, Super NES, Genesis, and N64, that solution has been actually pretty awesome.
No, I agree. Like, the Nintendo Online stuff is great.
Yeah.
I think what you guys have said be beating a dead horse, but I think the fact that honestly, again, especially for someone like me who doesn't have as much time just to sit and play consoles all the time, being able to play when I'm on like a road trip or something like that has been kind of a godsend because most of my screen time nowadays feels like it's on a mobile device, and the gaming experience, while can be good, it's still I feel like I still need those tactile controllers, and it felt like a really good middle ground.
I have a
And
work Switch that's in my laptop bag.
and I think the other thing is the Nintendo Switch has Breath of the Wild, which is
Yes.
easily in my top 5 games of all time. It could be in the top 3. I don't know. I played the hell out of it. It's not a perfect game, but it's one of those best thought out games that I've ever played. And the idiosyncrasies, the way you can interact with the world, and the elements, and the way you can combine stuff, things that they come out literally like still weekly. You get crazy things coming out of that game. That's one of the probably the most anticipated games that I'm waiting for, the Breath of the Wild sequel. My kids love Paper Mario Origami King, so did I.
Yeah.
Luigi's Mansion, um, Super Mario on that as well. There's so many games, even though I feel like it feels like a new console, but it's been around for quite a while, and
Yeah.
and so many games are just absolutely stellar. Granted, most of those are first party games, which you would come to expect from Nintendo. But this is the first time where I didn't feel like that was an excuse anymore. Like this time, I
Yeah.
didn't mind that the only games that I'm playing on this were first party games, because they were all stellar and I could play them the way that I wanted. It had that Wii U kind of magic where you had that party game and you could bring back again those random casual family members that aren't gamers.
Yeah.
You can still jump into any of these party games like Mario Party and stuff like that. So I thought it was a really great evolution to, again, what we said before. It's what the Wii U was really meant to be, and they finally did it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't care that it's underpowered. It's still going to be played well into, I feel like, this generation of Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, at least for me.
Sure.
So
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I mean, my son, like he's got it everywhere, right? He's got it in his bag, and he just loves it.
We've seen like this resurgence of games in this generation with indie titles, and indie titles do not require the most graphic capabilities or most graphical capabilities. And so I've bought the majority of my indie games on the Switch because not only do I get to have them on a console without any cutbacks, but I can also get them portable. So, that's huge. And not to mention, not only do they have Nintendo Online, but there's so many arcade collections that have come to the Switch. And it's like, well, hey, this has now become like the ultimate portable system for me because so many of those games that are pick up and play translate so well to the Switch and its layout.
Yeah,
for sure.
and for us who love retro gaming, like you said, Nintendo Online stuff, it lets us do this in a handheld manner and on a full console manner without having like an emulator or something like that. So it just it plays like such the middle ground of everything, but does everything in that middle ground way above average. So I think that's why it would be one thing if it did everything okay, and we would probably say, okay, then maybe that's a B or A. But the fact that it sits in this unique middle ground, but does everything so exceptionally well. The only thing that I would say bad about the first generation Switch is the battery life, because it was like 3 hours, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it sucked. Yeah.
But
we moved to the second gen. Yeah, the second gen.
The second gen and the OLED one have way better battery life. So, all right. We're getting to the modern ones. I feel like we might be a little bit early, obviously. Some people made jokes when I posted this that they haven't even been able to game on these because they can't even buy them. So let's make this one quick. First impressions, early impressions of these two consoles. First up, because it came out, I think, like 2 days before, the Xbox Series S, X. Where are we here with first impressions?
I'm going to say A tier. And so I mentioned earlier, I have 3 of these. My fiance has her own. That lives in the living room. I have one, and then I also have a Series S that lives in my office. And so, as Steve was saying, like about Games Pass and how great it is, I think Games Pass really shines on the series consoles. I think that, on this, I'm pretty sure you can do this on the previous gen, but they have cloud gaming. I ultimately think that there is going to be a move away from traditional consoles, and you're going to get something that's more akin to a Fire Stick for Xbox in the future. But I really love how snappy the Xbox Series consoles are. I think that all the issues I had with Xbox One were fixed in this. They definitely take advantage of faster loading. I've like Halo Infinite. I've dumped a lot of hours into that game, for better or for worse. I know a lot of people don't like the game, and I have my own gripes with it. But I've really enjoyed playing it on the Series S in my office, and downstairs on my Series X in the basement. They've done a lot of forward-thinking things with VRR, 120 hertz. Games that don't necessarily have huge graphical leaps do look amazing with 120 hertz and VRR enabled on games that don't necessarily hit 60 frames per second. So if you have a modern TV and a Series X or S, you're going to see some really cool stuff going on. I think that the UI works really well. I'm looking forward to some big games hitting. There's some stuff that I'm really excited about in 2022. Scorn is one of those games, which is the H.R. Giger inspired horror game. There's been some really interesting acquisitions that have happened with Xbox and Bethesda. So I mean, we're going to get Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield on here potentially exclusively. So I think that the series consoles have a lot of promise. So everything I said about Xbox One still exists, but I've had a really positive experience with my series consoles, especially since there's a lot of backwards compatibility going on in that system too, which is something to be really spoken for.
So I'd have to agree for now because I don't own this system yet, but actually I've got to give a shout out to Inu Tabi if he's watching. I was watching Kato's stream the other night, and I just popped in a message saying, yeah, I'm still trying to track one down, and he was able to let me know that there were some at Walmart. So I did actually order it the other day, and I'm eagerly awaiting for it to ship. So, but again, the way I Game Pass works for me perfectly, because I'm not going to devote an infinite amount of time and play a game to completion per se. And I do mainly sports games. So
one thing, smart delivery on Xbox is great.
Yeah.
Where if you have a game and there's a next generation update, it's there. And there are some holdouts like Activision, but hey, guess what? Guess who owns Activision now? So no more, hey, guess what? You're gonna have to pay $70 for your Call of Duty because we said so. And that's another thing too that's interesting is the acquisitions that Xbox has made.
Yeah.
I think the future's super bright for the series consoles and for Games Pass here. And I hope that they're actually going to make more games exclusively for the series console. But if you just want a really good, really well-performing machine, and I'm excited that you're getting one, Steve, because I think that it's great.
Yeah.
I think it works really well. Also, if you just take a external drive and hook that up to the system, like I took my external drive from my 1X and plugged it into my Series X on day one, and it's just like, oh, yep, there's all your games.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that I do enjoy more with Xbox in general. Certainly on my 1X, and I'll see how this performs on the Series X. Just the backwards compatibility, and just being able to save files and things like that. And but being more of an Xbox gamer now, the recent acquisitions, that's the big story for me. Microsoft's shelled out a ton of money for these companies, and granted, it's a drop in the bucket for a company the size of Microsoft, but still for that division of the company, those are sizable investments. So if Microsoft is going to be spending that kind of money, that signals to me that they have some really big things in store. And I'm really excited to see what that's going to look like.
All right, so I'll just chime in really quickly. I have a Series S, but I like literally never turned it on. Haven't played any games on it. I really intended to use it for one of my arcade consoles as like a retro because it's a really good emulator, but I never gotten around to it. The thing for me though, I will put it in A just because of the potential of it, like you guys have said. I think there's a lot of interesting potential. I don't think I actually do have doubts that all these acquisitions are going to really result in a lot of exclusives, but I think it bolsters the confidence that Xbox is in this. Microsoft
They might not be exclusive, but the first-party titles show up on Games Pass.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
which did not before. That was a big issue in the early days of Games Pass for sure.
So my interest in this is more. I think that their investment in this shows that they're in it for the long run. Because a lot of people are wondering, are the gaming consoles really on the way out now with PCs and everything like that? But I think Xbox saying, "Hey, we're acquiring these. We have faith in these." And I think their mentality when confronted with the exclusive question is how I feel. They feel like, exclusives are not consumer friendly in that sense. I do agree with that. And so if I believe in their philosophy going forward. So I think they have a lot of potential. So I'm going to put it with A. We'll see what comes of this. I'm also really interested to see what they do beyond just their box and more of the peripherals, since PlayStation obviously has the new VR coming out, VR2 coming out.
Yes.
We'll see what's going on with there. So last but not least, we'll talk about the PlayStation 5. And for me, I think I feel like it has less potential right now overall than Xbox, with the caveat that this potential Game Pass competitor, this kind of merging of PlayStation Now, PlayStation Plus, could be a really good one. The fact that they are trying to support more of that cross-generational free upgrade. If you have bought the PS4 version of Horizon, you get the free PS5. I think that the console itself has been great. The controller is probably the thing right now that I think has the most of potential, and I've enjoyed the most, even with just Astro's Playroom. I feel like the other games have not taken that into consideration or taken advantage of that yet, but I think there's a lot that has to be explored there.
Have you played Grand Theft Auto 5 on there yet?
Was that?
Play Grand Theft Auto 5 on PlayStation 5.
Oh, I haven't. Wait, is that out already?
Yeah, it's $10 on PlayStation 5.
Oh, I didn't even know that was out. I was going to buy that. Yeah. I knew that on Grand Theft Online, they were giving that out. But for me, I think it probably has a little bit less potential. But again, for me, the type of games that I play and the frequency I play like mostly AAA titles, for a year, like Horizon, which I've put in probably 130 hours already.
Wow.
And I see no end to that, even though I've beaten the game. I beat the game at like 110 hours. I'm still playing it. I've replayed Spider-Man when Miles Morales came out. Looking forward to both those sequels. God of War coming out hopefully in the mid part of this year. The sequel to one of the best games, as we've already said, in the last generation. And so I feel like this for PlayStation for me PlayStation 5 is going to be, again, a really good fit for how I play, more so than the Xbox. But I would say that overall, I feel like it might not have, at least right now, as much potential. Granted, they do have some other studio acquisitions that they kind of bite back with the Xbox ones, and they have really strong Sony studios. So I feel like there's still a lot of competition there. But I think this is going to be a really close generation, at least from the get-go.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll agree with a lot of that, and I think that the PlayStation 5's strongest suit is that PlayStation 4 complete backwards compatibility, including with PlayStation VR. So if you get a PlayStation 5, you have a huge library of titles available to you. The thing outside of the controller, which the controller, it sucks. I mean, it goes without saying that COVID sucks. The fact that people can't walk into a store and see and feel how revolutionary that controller is a crime, especially since it's also a crime that Sony can't make these available to the masses. How hard would it be to have a system where you go to PlayStation Direct's website and say, I want a PlayStation 5, and you put down a $5 deposit, and then when one becomes available, they put you in a queue. Sony has screwed the pooch by, and I'm not going to go on too much of a rant here, but they've screwed the pooch here by allowing the secondary market to harm their customer base the way it has. That said, they are actually creating actual next generation titles, and they're very much worth playing on PlayStation 5. Ratchet and Clank is an amazing game. Returnal is an amazing game. They're actual next gen experiences. And I feel like on the Xbox side, as much as I like my series consoles, I feel like you're actually getting next gen experiences from Sony, and Microsoft is yet to deliver anything like that on a first party perspective, because they're committed to backwards compatibility and supporting the previous generation, which is still a good thing because you're not leaving your Xbox One players in the dust, and a lot of people can't find these systems, period.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting generation right now, because like it's hard to have a generational leap because there's so many people that just can't, there's no accessibility to the new systems. I would say it's an A- for me, because there's some really cool stuff going on the PlayStation 5, but people can't experience it from the fact that the systems just aren't accessible, and it's just, there's just a handful of experiences, but it's really that backwards compatibility that carries a lot of it, in my opinion. And then again, as you said, pick the PSVR 2, and I've heard Half-Life Alyx, which in my opinion, I own VR, is the Mario 64 of VR experiences. So if that comes to PSVR, that's going to be monumental.
All right, Steve, any closing words before we close out Power Ranking, which took up 2 hours?
No. I mean, it's PS5 is a great system, no doubt. And my son keeps bugging me every day because he's dying to play Spider-Man, and I'm like, well, we're redoing our basement, so I'm like, okay, when we finish everything off, we'll get a PlayStation, we'll get a PS5 down there, and just so he can play Spider-Man. So, but I mean, it's all just the whole realm of exclusives, and that really irks me. But I think Microsoft, with these new acquisitions, they're going to do the same thing. I mean, and it's just the reality. It's the reality of the industry these days.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we're going to bring Power Rankings. That took a lot longer than I thought, but I actually knew it was going to take a long time. But I thought it was a really interesting discussion. Zero is just like an encyclopedia of video game history, which I wasn't expecting. But let's go on. We're going to have to brush through a lot of the rest of this just because timing-wise. So let's go back to... unfortunately, we're probably going to have to skip this or that. I did only do a couple of those just because I anticipated that we would take a long time. So let me go ahead. Oh, nope, that's not what I wanted to do. So we'll probably do that. I'll save these for another time, but we'll go ahead and add a new one, and we'll do 2 other segments really quickly before we let everyone go. Let's see here. All right. So we're going to come back with highly recommended. Want to see what your opinions are. If you guys don't remember, this is basically your opportunity to give one and only one recommendation for a game that you want folks to play. Doesn't have to be this current generation. Could be any generation you want. But you can only pick one, and you have like 30 seconds to tell us why you want to recommend this to this group. All right, so I'm going to start with Zero, and again, we got to keep it short.
I'll keep it short. Super Metroid. Super Metroid is a game that, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I play every year. The fact is it is a very tight action adventure game, and it tells a story without having multiple cutscenes. It just conveys a lot of atmosphere and mood, and it is very much worth your time. It's like one of the most Nintendo, but also un-Nintendo things that Nintendo has ever made, if that makes any sense. Play it. It is available on Switch Online. It's available on a lot of places. You will not regret it.
All right. Very quick and very easy. All right. What about you, Steve? One recommendation.
So it's a newer game that's coming out, the new Forza Horizon for Xbox. I haven't played it yet, and I will be soon. But just everything that I've seen online about that game, it just looks breathtaking. For
How are you going to recommend a game that you haven't even played?
Just seeing.
Hey, it's better than Gran Turismo 7 from my personal experience.
But you know, I've owned all the Forza Horizon versions, and this new one, just from everything I've seen online, it just looks breathtaking. And I've always been a big driving gamer. You know, I love driving games, and it just looks unbelievable. That's going to be the first game I pick up.
All right, I'm still giving you the side eye for recommending something you haven't even played yourself. But for me, I'm going to go with one that's pretty new but has old roots. I'm going to go with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And that's for Switch. I should put Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild. I put a ton of hours into this, as I said. T-Man also said that he had 2 playthroughs. I've had 2 playthroughs completely. Doing 100% both times. I don't know why you'd want to 100% both times, but I did do it both times. Again, it's one of these games that allows you to explore and play the game like you want in a variety of different ways. You can play it in a more exploratory way. You can play it in more of a combat way. You can be as advanced as you want. You can do clever interactions.
There's no wrong way to play it.
Yeah, there's no wrong way to play it, and you'll enjoy it whichever way you play it. And the characters are familiar, although different, and the whole story itself allows you to experience the world of Zelda without having to know all the history of Zelda and Link, which is basically every Zelda game. Honestly, most of them aren't pure quote unquote sequels as you would expect, but they're all very enjoyable experiences. It's a game that allows you to play multiple times and again just experience it different ways. I think a lot of games do that, like Super Metroid. I think is another game that allows you to play through multiple times, as Zero has said. But I think the other reason is because it is on Switch, which allows you to play on the go and have that experience wherever you are at your convenience, which I think is one of those things that is taken for granted nowadays. So even if you're a casual gamer, I think having a Switch and playing that game when you can will give you an experience that will be really rewarding, whether you put in 10 hours or 100 hours. Wherever you are.
The attention to detail in that game is just absurd. Like it was like I was today years old when I learned like you can get a suntan in the game, or if you drop an egg in the hot spring, it'll hard boil.
Yeah,
like it's that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and like I mean, even the fun stuff like just the cooking, the random recipes you can make, and the fact that like I didn't know this at first, but like it was one of those things later on that like each of the characters in the world the faces are basically conversions of the Mii's, like the Mii different faces. Like they basically convert those faces and use them to populate the NPCs in
I was today years old when I learned that.
Yeah, so crazy stuff like that. I thought it was so enjoyable. And again, I think anyone would really be able to enjoy it, whether you put in a couple hours a week or tens of hours a day or something like that. So those are our recommendations from Extra Zero, Super Metroid, from SNES, as well as multiple other platforms. Definitely classic. Steve, recommending Forza Horizon for Xbox Series X and S, which was coming out soon.
You can get it on Xbox One as well.
Oh, and Xbox One. Yes, sorry about that. and then me Breath of the Wild for the Switch, and hopefully its upcoming sequel. All right, this is the next segment, which is kind of an interesting one. I wanted this one to be because it's about gaming, and Zero and I talked about how we have a backlog of games that we want to play. And Steve, since you have Game Pass, I imagine you have a game catalog that you haven't played yet. If there's one game that is on your hit list that you've been wanting to play but haven't had a chance to play yet, what is it? Zero? Or come on, you have like a hundred games. I can't imagine you played them all.
Man, I do have a backlog, and I guess like the one that I picked up that I really want to play, but it's a big time sink, is going to be Elden Ring. And
Oh yeah, that's a new one.
yeah, so I picked it up, and I'm like sitting on it. I'm like, why did I do this? Especially since I'm like starting a big project at work, and I really want to get into it. If we want to talk like an older one that I have that I've been
It's just one. Just one.
Okay, Elden Ring is it.
All right, Steve, what about you? What's on your number one with a bullet?
So this is one I picked up, oh man, almost a year ago and still haven't played it. Control for the Xbox One.
Oh yeah.
I've heard so many amazing things about the game, saw a ton of the trailers and reviews online, but still sitting in the plastic. Haven't even peeled it off yet. But that's one I'm just really itching to get into.
So the one that I have that's been sitting in plastic. I have a lot of games that are sitting in plastic. I'm not gonna lie. Probably like 10 games. There's Red Dead Redemption 2. I haven't even played Last of Us 2 yet. There's a lot, but the one that I've heard so much about, and that is not something that I thought I was gonna want to play, but there's been so many different people telling me I should play it, is Nier Automata for PlayStation 4.
Yeah. Oh man.
I've heard of that one, yeah.
Yeah. Don't even think you need to play Nier Replicant first, because you don't.
Yeah. Everyone says you don't have to, but so people have been saying it's just
you don't want to.
An amazing game that has a lot of different play styles and kind of. So I think that will be really interesting. So that's just one that the reason I want to play it is because it was never on my radar, but everything I hear about it, people saying it's revolutionary and everything like that, makes me want to play it. I just haven't played it yet. So I'm hoping sometime between me finishing off upgrading some of my legendary weapons in Horizon Forbidden West and God of War coming out sometime in between, I'm hoping I can tackle that one. So that's it for me. So our hit list, that's our homework. Maybe by the next time we do a episode 2 of gaming, we'll have to do that, because we do have to do an episode 2 because we didn't do any of this or that. All right, so I think that's it for today. We usually do a Q&A, but we're already pretty past our time limit. We're going to skip this one, and I skipped comments because I haven't done a video in a long time, so I haven't gotten a lot of comments. Next time, the plan is to go back onto a Transformers / collecting topic. The one that we're going to probably tackle is collection photography or photography in general. My plan is to have a couple of guests. Hard Return, who's a well-known photographer, does some photos for Mastermind Creations and Oculus Max, as well as True Starscreamer, Extra Zero's compatriot at FAP, Figure Action Podcast. He's going to be on that, and then maybe we'll have another guest we're still seeing. That should be in 2 weeks from now. I just need to confirm that works, and that leads me to the announcement that we are going to actually try to keep this a little bit more regular. I've been trying to accommodate schedules, Friday, Saturday, different times, just to make it a little bit more consistent for us, for me, for scheduling, as well as for you, the viewers, to know when Community Chatterday is coming out. It's going to be every other Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. So we're going to work around everyone's schedule to try to keep that as much as possible. If you enjoyed the Community Chatterday, whether you joined live or you're joining afterwards, and you want to get in on the discussion, participate, think of topics or whatever, the best place to do that is to hit up this Discord link to my Discord server, where you can join, just hang out, talk about random things, whether it's Transformers or not. And then we have a dedicated private Chatterday channel in there, where if you want to get in on that, organization, planning, volunteering for topics and so forth, wanting to be a guest or whatever, that's a separate channel. So click that link in the description below at any point. You can join that. And as always, you can reach out to me on Facebook at Pick for Life Reviews. So with that, let me give Steve some time for some closing words before we go over to Zero.
Well, just want to say thanks for having me on. It was a great discussion tonight, and these chatter days in the community, it's really fantastic, and it's nice to be able to talk about things other than Transformers too. There's so many of us that have so many additional hobbies, so just kind of splitting it up that way, I think, is really great as well. So just thanks for having me on. Had a great time. Awesome.
Really quick before we get to Zero, Baker Jim was supposed to come on. He had some other more important commitments that he had to do, but just so he can join in on the hit list, he said Inscription is on his hit list along with Ghost of Tsushima, which is also on my hit list. I do need to get to Ghost of Tsushima. All right. Let's see. I Still Function just announced you have FD Bandit. Everyone will show up. Yeah, no, unfortunately not. Although I heard the Chop is coming out in short order, so that might be my next review, depending on how that comes out. So Zero, any closing statements from you?
Yes, I just really want to echo what Steve said. Thanks for having me on here. It's been fun talking about gaming. I everything I do online, I talk about Transformers, and gaming is a huge passion for me. Almost, if not equally as much as Transformers. I know a lot about gaming, and I probably didn't shut the heck up tonight when it came to a lot of topics, but it's something I'm really passionate about. And even if you don't agree with what I had to say, there is no wrong way to game. So if you don't agree with any of the rankings, that don't allow that to impact your personal opinion on stuff. There legitimately is no wrong way to game. So whatever you enjoy, play it and play the heck out of it. There is no need for confirmation bias when it comes to something that you love. I just feel like gaming is one of the last escapes that we have in ever so politicized world. So, be geek and be proud when it comes to it. So
nice way to sign off, and good shout out to MGO. Love that.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Enjoyed the time. I know we went a little long. Thank you for the dozen or 2 dozen that were on at some point during the stream. If you guys are catching this on the rewind, let us know in the comments what you enjoyed, what your rankings were. If you disagree with Zero, which you probably should on a lot of his rankings. And again,
on some of them. On some of them.
And we'll have to do this again because we didn't get to the this or that, which I know is a crowd favorite. I had some that I think would be good discussion topics, but gaming is a broad topic. Even we were going to try to keep it tight knit to modern generation, but when I saw the power ranking, I was like, I got to do this one. So we'll have to cut it down to something else.
Hey, let's do a part 3 for portables.
Yeah, we have to do portables in that. Devote another 2 hours for that one, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Would Switch be able to go in that as well?
Switch has to go in there.
I think so. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Zero, for making the time coming. Thank you all for joining. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. Please check out Figure Action Podcast. I'll make sure to add their link below. Steve, I don't think you have a YouTube channel, right?
No, I'm just strictly a fan.
Okay, well, if there's any way that they can get in touch with you, or you'd like them to get in touch with you, please let me know, and I'll add that to the link below. And again, we'll see you in 2 weeks with the next topic, hopefully Transformers photography. If not, I'll put a post up letting you guys know what the new topic is going to be. But with that, thanks a lot, everyone. I hope you guys have a good one.
Peace out.
See you, everyone.